Hi beautiful souls, it's Tan here today with another astrology video for you, and today we want to be talking about composite chart red flags. So before we get started, if you've been keeping up with the channel and you like the content that I've been putting out, you can support me on a platform called coffee.com by Buy Me a Coffee. And the support that you provide me with will go into purchasing tools and equipment that I have to use to make YouTube videos for you guys, as well as putting up birth chart readings. So I have made a video on synastry red flags, I guess sometime last year, and there's been requests for red flags in the composite chart. And the thing about composite charts is that a composite chart is a chart of the relationship itself. So it's you and another partner coming together, and it shows a natal chart of the relationship. So the thing about, synastry and why it's possible to have a red flag in the synastry is because the synastry shows you're relating with another person. So it's possible that some behaviors can be considered red flags. It's kind of like you have two cats and one cat is just poking their paws in the other cat's eye. Possible red flag. That cat could be abusive, right? Because the synastry shows how you relate to each other. But the composite chart is kind of like the cats come together and they want to build a cat home. And okay, and maybe in the home the toilet is leaky, but that's still livable. They can work on it, they can fix a toilet. Or maybe let's say the house has no windows and it's all dark. They can still have really bright lights inside, but from time to time they have a nice garden, that they can go out and hang out, get some sun. So there's really no one thing in the composite chart that is an indicator of a red flag, but we can have a composite that is a red flag composite chart, or it's a composite chart that indicates that it's just really hard. Because it's kind of like, you have a house, the two cats have a house, and the toilet's leaky. There's no windows in the house. The bedroom's got molds. There's no space for a garden. The neighbor's super noisy, and on the other side there's a construction going on, and but okay, we can still say that maybe the two cats are just, they have a lot of perseverance. They really have a lot of attraction for each other. They can still make it work. But it's definitely going to be hard. You see what I mean? But also, let's say all these things are happening in their house, and also the ground is sinking. So we can have lots of little annoying things or things that don't seem to work in the composite, but with the addition of something like the ground, the structure of a relationship, of a house, of a relationship that doesn't also support what's already happening, then we have a composite chart that doesn't really function. So it's a little more complex than synastry when we look at a composite chart. So if you want to get a composite chart between you and a particular person, I'm gonna give you guys a quick tutorial on how to get the composite chart right now. So you can do that on astro.com, and then you can go to extended chart selections and type in the birth information for you and a partner, and then you want to select you and a partner in the tabs for the natal charts. And then when we have the chart types, you want to scroll down and then choose this particular one for the composite chart. Make sure that you've adjusted your settings to include quintiles and biquintiles, which are really important in synastry and composites. You may want to turn down the orbs to 80%. And you may want to turn on aspects to all objects, so we have aspects to the ascendant as well. And then click to show the chart. So I want to give you a couple of indicators that a composite relationship chart could be difficult. And so if you have several of these, it can lead to the foundation of the relationship falling apart, or it could lead to too much difficulty that the two people are going to be wasting their energy in this relationship, and it may not be worth it. So just one thing is definitely not enough. We need a series of these things. So the first indicator of maybe a leaky bathroom, shall we say, in the composite chart is going to be a sun in the composite in the 8th or the 12th house. Because the sun in a composite chart is really showing where the energy of the two people are going in this relationship. So if you're both coming together and we have the brightest part of the relationship, the energy of the relationship in the 8th or the 12th house, it's kind of an energy depleting placement for our relationship. So this can show that our relationship depletes your energy. Of course, we can work with it. You know, if we have easy aspects to the sun or we have other things going on, we can work with it. But generally, this on its own is showing that there's an underlying subconscious reason why the two of you are coming together, that you both are not wanting to share with each other, Sun in the 8th, or that you both don't know, Sun in the 12th. And Sun in the 12th can even show that there is no clear direction or goal or where the relationship is going. Sun in the 8th, there's a direction, there's a goal, but there's this dark energy surrounding the relationship, and the goal is based on something more subconscious. And over time, it's going to leak out and can make two people feel that because the other person is operating so subconsciously to each other, that it's draining of their energy because of the boundaries that can be crossed. So first indicator, just this on its own does not mean that things are not going to work out in the composite. The second indicator of difficulty in the composite, like a mold in the bedroom, is going to be having Pluto in a hard aspect to some personal planets, especially the Sun, Mercury, or the ascendant and the descendant, so some of the angles. So this can look like having a Pluto square Sun in the composite, Pluto opposite Sun, Pluto square Mercury, or Pluto conjunct the descendant or conjunct the ascendant of the composite chart. These are the kind of the 5 stronger ones. And for this to really work, I like to make sure that they're in the right signs in the composite chart. If it's in the wrong sign, or if the orb is too wide, you may not really feel this, and it may be okay. It may not be a theme. You may have other things going on that can kind of balance this off. So you want to make sure that if it's a square or opposition, that the signs are actually square signs and they're actually opposite signs. With the Sun and Pluto being in a hard aspect, it is showing that there's some kind of tendencies to control each other in this relationship, and it's controlling each other's identities, which is the Sun, and personal self-expression, because when one person expresses themselves or are their individual selves, the other person feels threatened. And when Pluto feels threatened on a survival level. Like, the two of you could actually feel like you're not going to make it in terms of materially or kind of survival wise in the world, just because of the way that the other person is expressing themselves. And so with this particular aspect, we have to make sure that we are controlling ourself, not the other. This is going to cause a lot of resentments if we subtly control another person. Turning the energy inwards into yourself and try to figure out, is there something with regards to your Sun that's not being expressed? Are you controlling of your personal self-expression to the point where when somebody else wants to express their personal self-expression, you feel like you have to control them? And if so, why are you controlling this part of yourself? Are you living based on something of your past, a fear of the past, insecurities that you haven't yet worked out yet? Pluto square Mercury tends to lead to two people, if this is a really close orb, can be a bit dangerous because it's a more tyrannical type of an energy where both of you have opinions and ideas, and you are really, really smart and crafty in how you are going to make the other person come around to your way of thinking unconsciously, because Pluto's unconscious. So with this particular aspect, we have to make sure that we are accepting of the other person's truth, that we can have different truths, but we can come together and still have something in common. But maybe we have another separate way of thinking that is just different. And maybe the other person, your partner, can actually enlighten you. You can actually enlighten each other on new ways of thinking. Pluto conjunct the ascendant or the descendant is gonna make it a platonic relationship. Pluto is just gonna be a very important planet, and all things platonic is gonna come out. Meaning possession, jealousy, control, some form of manipulation, sometimes even depending on other things, abuse can happen. And this is an aspect where it really would require the two people to really do some sort of purging from inside themselves so that they're not acting on insecurities and fears. And so when we're talking about Pluto conjunct the ascendant or the descendant, it can be from the 12th, 1st, 7th, or 6th house, but it has to be, close and in the same sign to the ascendant or the descendant. If it's just in the 7th house or it's in the 1st house on its own, that's going to be, this theme will be lessened. So, you may be able to work through it. But if it's like conjunct within, let's say, 5 degrees to the ascendant or the descendant, this is a thing. All right. The next indicator that you could have a difficult composite chart, if this couples with some of the other things I'm mentioning in this video, is when the sun or the moon in the composite chart is not making any aspects, major aspects, and it's only making difficult aspects. Major aspects, we mean the conjunction, the square, the opposition, the trine, the sextiles. These particular 5 ones. Biquintiles and conjunctions are not major aspects, not the main aspects. So if the sun is not making any of these 5 aspects, but they're only making, let's say, a square, or there's only making a particular opposition to any planets except Jupiter, to any of the other planets. Like, for example, let's say the moon makes a square to Uranus and a square to Pluto, no other aspects. Or the sun makes an opposition to Mars and a square to Uranus. And there's no trines or sextiles, and not even an okay conjunction. It's just showing that the energy that is operating with the 2 core parts of this relationship is not flowing, it's not blending. So it's going to cause, especially if it's the moon, it's going to not feel great. The relationship will just not have a comfortable feeling or a feeling of nourishment or fulfillment or even happiness. And if it's the sun, it's going to show difficulties with expression of your individual selves and the direction of where the relationship is headed. So when you have this in the composite chart, we always want to see what is Mercury doing, because if Mercury is also making some pretty, easy aspects like trines, sextiles, and some nice conjunctions, we can actually talk about things and we can let the energy out through our communication and cooperate. But if Mercury is also challenged, then we've got that house with moldy bathrooms and leaky bathrooms and moldy bedrooms, noisy neighbors, and the floor, the ground is sinking, and maybe there's also no windows in the house. It's kind of that kind of a situation that can happen, and you're gonna have to both decide if you're getting what you want to get in this relationship, or can you get something else from this relationship, but what's missing you can get somewhere else with other people, friends or family. So we can balance things out in that way. The next aspect that's showing difficulty in the composite chart is Neptune, being in a hard aspect to some personal planets, specifically the Sun, Moon, and Mars. And the angle, so the ascendant and the descendant. So Neptune being in a square or opposite to the Sun. This is going to show that you don't see each other clearly since the start of the relationship, the both of you, and you are projecting what you want to see onto another person, and it leads to disappointment later on when each other's real selves finally come forth. So this depends on how close the orbs of the square or the oppositions are. And if there's a lot of tolerance, like 11th house planets, we can still find that we are accepting of another person. But if we don't have more tolerant aspects, this coming out of your real self, it's kind of gonna cause this shame or a certain amount of extreme disappointment that it no longer, or this can be with regards to the goals of the relationship, that it no longer feels like you even want this relationship anymore. That's what it can feel like. Neptune square to the moon. This is hard because this is showing that this can cause a bit of a martyr savior type of energy in the relationship. You're both using your emotions and feelings to escape from something in your actual life, whatever that may be, taking some kind of responsibility in your actual life to taking responsibility for another person. And the problem with this, the issue with this, is that it can lead to codependency, and it can cause two people to step over each other's boundaries, because one person may keep needing the other person for help and the other person keeps coming back because they feel like they want to escape from something in their own lives. And so we're taking the energy, the emotional investment from our own life and what we want to accomplish into the relationship. And this is an aspect that can also cause the two people to enable each other's more escapist tendencies. If one or two people like to escape into alcohol and drugs, the other person can enable that simply because they don't know where else their energy is going to go, and it's coming into this relationship. And so over time, this one also causes disappointment, because it's kind of like, well, I've helped you too much, or you've helped me too much, and we lost the sense of who we really are, and this relationship is just not what we're looking for. Neptune square, conjunct, opposite, inconjunct, semi-sextile to Mars is a really, really big indicator of something to watch out for in a relationship, because this is showing that something about your relationship is weakening both of your energies and your self-assertiveness. All of these aspects can show something of a sexual dependency as well. And it can we're still playing this martyr game, meaning that one person may take the other person's weaker points and depend on the other person to not use their strengths, so that that person can feel safer or feel better about themselves in one way or another. It's kind of a bit of a selfish relating that we've got going here. And the person who is being taken advantage of, and this can go back and forth between the two because it's a composite chart, the person who's kind of having their weakness being played by the other person tends to go along because they're escaping into this relationship with this other person and they're addicted. So let's say one person, their strength really lies in being with their family. They feel good being with their family. They want to put a lot of effort into whatever they want to do with their family. But the other person feels like that strength that the person has makes them feel uncomfortable, makes them feel unsafe, lonely. So they're going to try to find ways to say, yeah, but I think that your family, I don't know, I just don't feel great when you're not with me. I just don't feel great when you're with your family. And the person who is being played on can kind of be like, all right, yeah, well, I'll just stay with you. I won't do this, I won't do that. All right, I prefer to stay home with you, and So we can keep going with this, and then that person's weakness, their self-esteem, their self-confidence, their ego structures becomes fuzzy over time. So if you want to really work with this one, this is hard, but what you can do is that the person who is being played at, you're going to have to be aware that the other person is doing this and admit to yourself that they're doing this to you, and you have to cut it off. Meaning that you have to say, you would like me to be with you tonight, but I already had plans with my family. So, no, you're going to have to be alone. So we have to cut the dependency off in order for this to work. We have to strengthen each other's will and energy instead of weakening it. So Neptune conjunct the ascendant, conjunct the descendant, or in a square to the ascendant or square to the descendant, is showing that you're coming together in this relationship without much direction. That there's an underlying motivation for coming together that weakens the other person's life direction or each other's life direction and purpose of the relationship. So over time, it can feel like we thought we knew where the relationship was going. We thought that this is what we're going to have together, this is what we're going to accomplish together. But it kind of blows in your face that the other person is not really having it in their core or in their mind that this is where we're going. You have a totally different idea since the start of where the relationship was supposed to go, but you thought that you were going in the same direction. Over time, you realize that since the start, the other person had a different agenda for the relationship, and you end up not really knowing where to go. So that can happen here with this one. Really hard to work through. So if you have this, you have to be yourself. Also with Neptune and the Sun, you have to be yourself from the start of the relationship. So you have to know what that is like, where you're going with regards to your own life direction, and you have to not compromise that. So the next aspect that can show difficulty in the composite, coupled with other things, of course, is going to be Saturn and Mars. So Saturn in a hard aspect to Mars or the Sun, Saturn is square to Mars or in opposition to Mars, is showing that the long-term plan of a relationship, which is Saturn, and the immediate spontaneous action taking of the relationship with regards to Mars is in conflict with each other. And this can either cause a blow up if it's an opposition, or in constant tension if it's a square, meaning that we know that the way the other person, let's say maybe it spends their money or goes out and socializes or, exercises or does things, Mars things that they do on a daily basis, that's taking away the resources or the planning, the time that needs to be spent, the management, or the energy from where the relationship is going long term. So that means like marriage or having a family. So those two parts of the relationship is in a conflict with each other. And this is difficult because if we really think about Mars, which is ruled by Aries, and Saturn, which is ruled by Capricorn, they naturally square each other in the zodiac wheel. Saturn rules the 10th, Mars rules the 1st. They're both very ambitious, and they both don't compromise. Capricorn and Aries are not such compromising archetypes in astrology. So what happens with this one is that we may need to lessen our forcefulness by having humility, and that's really hard to do in a relationship. So this means that maybe you need an outsider, like a counselor, to kind of bring in another perspective to what's going on in your relationship, so that you both don't feel like you're butting heads, but that you are both being modest and humble because there's somebody else who is more knowledgeable to come in and to give you guys some kind of advice. Both the opposition and the square. So this is how you may work with this one. And this can also translate into some difficulties in the bedroom in terms of sexuality as well. So yeah. And Saturn in a square to the Sun could still be okay, but it's showing a similar theme, that the identity of the relationship is in conflict with the long-term goals of the relationship. How you guys want to express the relationship and shine as a couple, that's in conflict with the long-term planning of the relationship. So this one you may have to kind of shall we say, sacrifice. You may have to sacrifice some of your individuality for the long-term planning of the relationship, and that's hard to say that you have to make these kind of sacrifices, because the Sun can sometimes represent your career. So this aspect may indicate, and in conjunction as well between Sun and Saturn, can even indicate that you have to sacrifice, maybe it's your career, your individual sun, the way that you want to shine in the world, so that we can go along with the long-term planning of a relationship. So if you guys have this and you're both quite selfless, or you know, I don't even want to say selfless, you're not very ambitious. One of you is just not very ambitious, and you're okay. You're more relationship focused and orientated, and you have a way of working with it. This can work, maybe, but a lot of times the reason we have this in the composite chart is because you're both strong individuals and ambitious in nature. So, on top of everything I've mentioned so far, if in the composite chart you also have in conjunctions to Uranus or Jupiter, to specifically the Sun and the Moon. So Jupiter is in conjunction to the Sun, and Uranus is conjunction to the Moon, or Jupiter is in conjunction to the Sun and the Moon, and Uranus is in conjunction to the Moon. On top of everything I've mentioned so far, and this is adding to that, it's going to show that it's not that you can't compromise in other parts, but you also maybe just don't even, at the core of your mindset and the way that you think about relationships, the way that your vision of your relationship, the vision of your life and how your relationship's going to coincide with your life is actually not the same. Your ideals for the relationship is not the same to start with. So it could be that one person actually, has a vision that this relationship is going to help them grow, expand their world. The other person has the vision that this relationship is for security and it's going to provide them with material security. This is the fundamental it's like the house with the foundation that is shaky. This can be very hard to reconcile in a relationship, and it's not going to be obvious from the start, especially if because it's an in conjunction. So it's going to, over time, when the attraction and the frictions and the compromising kind of settles down, we still realize that the vision that we've had from the start of what relationships would do for us is not the same. I don't know if you guys have seen my videos on the biggest mistake we made in relationships. Basically, in that video, I talk about how not all relationships are meant to be romantic or sexual. If you have this on top of everything else, you may want to consider whether this relationship is supposed to be a sexual, romantic marriage type, or maybe it's supposed to be a friendship. Maybe it's supposed to be a soulmate without commitment. Maybe it's supposed to be a mentor type of a relationship. And the last thing I do want to mention before I finish off this video is that if you have any of these aspects that I mentioned here, and this is a repeat, meaning that it also shows up in your synastry chart and in your individual natal charts. For example, let's say you have a Sun square Pluto in the composite, Sun opposite Pluto in the synastry, and then in one of your natal charts you have a Sun square Pluto. This is going to be that very kind of invasive theme in your relationship, and it's going to be the leading kind of issue in the relationship that really needs to be addressed in one way or another. So just something to keep in mind there. So that's it, beautiful souls, and like I said since the start of the video, that just one of these aspects will not really show that the relationship is too difficult to handle. But if we have several of them, then yes, that can show that. Oh, and by the way, the other thing about Neptune is that Neptune, hard aspects like we talked about, and sometimes when you have lots of easy Neptune aspects, like for example, if in the composite chart you have Neptune sextile the Moon, Neptune trine the Sun, Neptune conjunct Venus, Neptune sextiles Mars, Neptune trines Mercury. We have an overabundance of Neptune, or we have the hard Neptunes that I mentioned. It can sometimes cause a curtain or a veil over some Plutonic themes, or some hard Saturn Mars themes, or some in conjunctions of Uranus and Jupiter that I mentioned previously. It can kind of show that we're not seeing clearly some more underlying issues of the relationship, because we're too involved in escaping into the good feelings, the romantic feelings of the relationship. We prefer to gloss over the practicalities or some of the other issues that we have going on in the relationship. So something to keep in mind there. All right, this is turning out to be a pretty long video. If you guys have any of these aspects in your composite chart, comment below and let us know what your experiences have been, how you've been working with it. And if you like this video, then do give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button below if you haven't. If you already subscribed, thank you very much for coming along. I do birth chart readings, synastry, and relationship readings. All the information is on my website. You can check that out. And yeah, have a beautiful day, beautiful souls. Bye.